What it do? It's the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show. Week 3 of the NFL is underway. We're doing a little Thursday night action tonight, watching the Jets early on cruise past the Patriots. Aaron Rodgers completing passes to his old friend Alan Lazard. Breece Hall doing his thing. Allen popping up as intriguing must-have handcuff. Definitely getting some more snaps tonight. And the Patriots looking more like the team we thought they were, but we got a ton of stuff to get into, and we are back. We finally got Aaron back from the beach. He's Steven Masterson, Aaron Hernandez. I'm JJ Buck, and as we go into this week, it's already survival mode for so many people in fantasy football. Last year, it was the quarterbacks, and we had a league in which 66 different players started at the quarterback position. This year, it's your big name fantasy players. It started with Christian McCaffrey not taking the field yet, going on IR. You have his teammate Deebo Samuel with a calf injury. We had A.J. Brown pop up with a multi-week muscle injury. We got Puka Nacua hurt in week 1, going on the IR. You run down the list, and unfortunately, our guy Steve has 2 of those on it. How are you feeling? How are you doing, sir?
I mean, that team looks terrible. But that's how week to week fantasy goes, right? You draft a team, you look at it, you feel amazing, and then by week 2 you go, wow, my whole team's injured. I'm probably never going to win a game this season. So we have 2025 to look forward to.
You kind of sound like the Carolina Panthers. And this situation, we're just like, hey, we're on the Andy Dalton. See what happens.
No, if we're being 100% honest, I think there's a few moves I can make. And how I look at it, if we're being honest about the team, if I can get out of this.
We're an honest podcast, yes.
Well, if I can get out of this 3-3, 3-4, and Puka comes back and CMC come back, I feel great about the team. If I start to, week 7, I'm 2-5, or, week 6 isn't looking fantastic, I'm more than willing to try to move one of those or both of those guys and make my team better to make a playoff push. Maybe a team that is closer, and it feels like, oh, I can sit on them for a little bit because I'm 6-1 or whatever it may be. So you kind of have to go week by week. I got lucky in week 1, so I'm still 1-1. I don't feel like it's out of reach, and made some trades this week, so we'll see how it goes.
And we're going to talk about those trades and how it is already trade season early in the year with so many injuries, but then also just taking advantage of the fact that we all have emotions and we go crazy about fantasy football. But Aaron, you had one of those last second things that it's why we wake up Sunday morning, and you got to make sure that even if you want to sleep in like 10 minutes before that first kickoff, you got to be up. You got to be able to look at your phone. So Evan Ingram suffers an injury in the pregame warmups, and then you got to go scramble mode on the waiver wire. And it's just one of those situations that you never want to have happen, and got you on Sunday.
Yeah, it does happen. It's like, luckily, when I saw that, I'd gone back up to the hotel room and I have internet. So, I was able to change that out because I saw that notification at the last minute.
Just sitting there on breakfast under vacation, and also just get up, start running. Fantasy football, hold on.
Gotta make that lineup change, but it's tough when that happens right before game time because you really don't get that much time to look at waivers because that broke pretty late. So
yeah, and you went with an option I would go with because they talked up Taysom Hill so much, and the Saints offense now, obviously after that Dallas game too, we see how explosive it is, and you were able to pick him up, and unfortunately he gets hurt, and so he leaves that game and he doesn't do anything. But the fact that Brenton Strange, the direct fill-in for Evan Ingram, had 119 air yards, which was the most air yards for a tight end, was crazy. Do you think he is someone that can do it again in that Jaguars offense?
It's a tough one. I haven't seen enough of Strange, but the way that game turned out, I guess he can slot in. Yeah.
targets.
I know. And
Like
there's
right
no way
there.
in hell I expected that, to be honest. So I was like, well,
He's a name
that's-
that's on the list because the tight end landscape, we know
Mhm.
there's disappointing players up top. There's a rookie that we discussed last week that people love, but we know he's still a rookie tight end, and there can be ebbs and flows to that. So, Strange, I think, is someone that even if you've already gone through waivers, I don't know how many people picked him up. And if Evan Ingram is out again, I'd be looking at him, and I'd also be keeping an eye on Monday Night Football with T. Higgins. If Higgins is out again, I think Mike Gesicki's a thing in that
Oh,
offense.
absolutely.
Even his his snap share isn't that high, but Joe Burrow's throwing him the football.
Yeah, and that kind of is like how Jacksonville. It's like it's crazy because all those air yards that Trevor Lawrence has throwing the ball, a lot of it seemed like it went to Brenton Strange there for some reason. So it'd be interesting. I almost picked up Gesicki, just to see where it goes, but those two are definitely on the list in the tight end landscape.
Yeah, I think that's when you look at if you're on the back end, I think Jake Ferguson is still questionable, but the Cowboys believe that he'll be back this weekend. I think, Ferguson can be a player down the stretch in this league because the Cowboys are desperate for a second receiving option in offense, and we saw him prove it last week. And I think this flows into our first conversation, and it's buying low or selling high. Yes, already 2 weeks into the season, you see the articles from everyone in the great fantasy community about jumping on players that are off to a slow start after 2 weeks or selling players that are doing really good. And I'm really intrigued to get your thoughts on this because I think this is something that sounds so easy, but is one of the hardest things to do. Because when we're talking about buying low, usually attacking a player that someone drafted in the first 4 to 5 rounds that they really like and they believe has a high upside. So what are you willing to give up for that? But then we're also talking about selling high. It's hard to give up on players that have been performing well. And I think, one of those players that comes to mind is like a J.K. Dobbins. Did he have his 2 best games of the year? Probably. He goes over 130 yards and a touchdown the first 2 weeks, but then you realize it's a Chargers team that they're going to run the football the entire season. Gus Edwards is getting his carries, but Dobbins has been more explosive. And even if those numbers come down, it's hard to give up on a player like that just to sell high. So when I look at this philosophy and how people should go about it, first up, is your team decimated by injuries? And that's a sell high opportunity if you still have someone on your team to potentially get multiple players back. Now, when it comes to buying low, to me, it's about using your depth in each situation. But I'm interested to see how you guys feel about this because it's one of those things you see articles the first couple weeks of the season. I think it's really hard to buy low because you have to pry one of those players from someone. But the concept overall, I'll start with you, Steve, about buying low, selling high. Do you like the theories? Do you do it? Like, how do you manage this when you see all those articles?
Well, buying low or selling high, both make sense, especially when you think about like how you felt last week, right? Last week you were ready to give up on your team. Those are the managers you are trying to buy low from, right? Like, hey, your team, maybe you started 0-2 and the players you thought were going to be performing well are not performing at the level you drafted them at. So maybe I can sneak, hey, these 2 players kind of near the same value. This guy's scoring a little bit more than that guy. You want to make that trade. So I get buying low, right? Jamar Chase has had 2 bad games in a row. You might be able to get that manager and say, hey, Jamison Williams has been killing it. Do you want to make that trade? Right? Or something along those lines where I can get Jamar Chase and I'm giving a really good player, but maybe a player I drafted late to take to get
buying
Jamar
low,
Chase.
it feels like you might have to, unless like depth is big, and we'll talk about that in trades about how it worked in our league. But packaging players like if you say you're chasing, Jamar Chase or Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson might be that dude because it looks like with the Jets out in front tonight, they lean on their running backs. Garrett Wilson might have another slower game.
I told you Garrett Wilson was going to be bad.
You're right. You're right. even with targets, he'd average games the first 2 weeks, and you're not first or second round games for sure.
Yeah.
At the wide receiver position. But Aaron, when you're looking at it, looking at rosters, the way managers are feeling, kind of what are your thoughts when you're trying to get a player on a discount from someone, or even looking at your team to sell one of your players high?
It's an interesting way to look at things. It's like the buy low. You're basically, you got to be kind of, in my opinion, in the mind of the other owner, where they're filling on that player, where they think they either have depth or don't, and it's like to me, I think it's hard to convince someone, especially on name value, because if you're gonna pull someone that's that big away, typically it's a little bit hard, but it really depends on the owner, because some owners really don't care that much. It's like they'll see that player, they have their name, but someone else drafted lower is gonna probably outproduce them, the rest of the season possibly. So it's like, where do you want to change your points coming in? It's like, what part of the season do you want it now? Do you want it later? Where is it? So it is a little tough. And on the sell high is tough for me, but I will, do that if, I get trade offers that I like. So it's like, I don't have a problem with that either way. So
Well, I always kind of echoing Aaron's point, right? Like getting in the other manager's head. I've always believed the best way to figure out if they're willing to move off a player that you're interested in is to ask,
Yeah.
right? Reach out. Hey, I'm interested in this player. Do you have any interest in trading them? And if they say no, then we move on quick. And if they say, yeah, because maybe it is a candidate that they're just not happy with how they're performing, then you go, cool, like let's make a deal. So I think it's easier to sometimes just reach out and ask that guy, are you interested in selling this player, or are you interested in moving off of him? Um, and then asking them where they think their weakness is, because you are right. Everybody's depth is different. They might look at it and be like, no, dude, I love my wide receivers. I need a running back. And you're like, okay. And you might not agree with that, but it doesn't matter. It's not your team.
That's right. It's a communication, man. It's your friends, whether you have the group chat going, the text message thread, Yahoo, you can direct message on there. I finally figured it out. Thank you, Aaron. How to do that with managers in your league. And that's where it starts, because I just sending trades are going to sit there. They're going to get lost if you don't have communications. That's first and foremost. And you talk with people, and yeah, it's already just 2 weeks into the season, but it's trade season, and we had 2 trades in our league yesterday. I think it's really interesting, because I think there are players that a lot of people are potentially moving, are looking to acquire right now. And I start with you, Steve, because we did discuss your team is hitting with injuries, and you were able to kind of swap stacks. So you were a Josh Allen owner that drafted Mark Andrews, and then you went big to get Isaiah Likely on waivers. So you had those guys. The Lamar Jackson owner in our league drafted Dalton Kincaid. And so that was the basis of the trade. You found common ground there. You're like, oh, hey, we can swap. We each get our stack there. But then, of course, you needed a little bit more due to your injuries. And so you were able to talk up Jameson Williams, throw him in the deal. Of course, you package Andrews Likely, and he's like, oh, I like Christian Watson on your roster. And you make that move.
Yeah. So for me, I still believe Andrews is the better tight end. And I mean, last week he kind of proved he was going to get a lot of looks. Kansas City just shut him down. But I don't think there's a huge drop off between Kincaid and Andrews, but there is a drop off. So when we were having that conversation, he was interested in Andrews. I said, okay, if I give you Andrews, I need a tight end back. So I let's get our swaps back. And I was the Watson owner, but I'm also dealing with Puka Nakua, and I have Jalen Waddle. So Watson, I love, and who I've loved all offseason. We've talked him up, but Jordan Love's hurt. So I can't just I can't have him because he's a boomer bust red zone threat. And Waddle is kind of the same thing. Without Tua, I don't think he's going to perform at the same level. Again, another man crush, right? So I talked to him. He said he had 5 wide receivers he loved. Jameson Williams wasn't starting for him. and he's a player I'm interested in. And I thought even if he only gets 2 or 3 more big weeks for me, that's all I really need. I just need a few big weeks till my injured players come back. So yeah, I gave up Christian Watson, a player I do actually believe in, for a player who's performing at a high level though. So I don't want to sell Jameson Williams short. So he, in my opinion, got the better tight end. I got the better receiver.
And we did discuss Dalton Kincaid last week because we had the Thursday night performance and they were in control. But you did point out, he got 4 early targets and converted 4 for 33. So in different game scripts, I think that ceiling is going to be back for Kincaid. Maybe not what we were expecting, potentially thinking a top 3 to 4 tight end, but with the injuries to the position, with the other players underperforming, he's going to have you in that mix. I think the rest of the year, where Mark Andrews does, but I think you upgraded at the wide receiver position. Now, the trade I made, we had an owner in our league, man. He was sitting on the gold mine. He had Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. And so he was playing Trey McBride, and I asked him, hey, do you want to trade one of your tight ends? And he sent me Brock Bowers for Derrick Henry, and I did it 1-for-1. And I think, Derrick Henry is going to have a solid floor. I think what they did last week, when he had negative yards in the first quarter, and then he still ended with 18 carries, got 84 yards, got a look in the red zone. Like, he's a good player. But when I looked at Brock Bowers, I did like the upside, and the fact what stood out to me too from that same game is in the fourth quarter. Yes, Devontae Adams is the alpha, but Gardner Minshew was feeding Brock Bowers, and he was able to be a playmaker, be a guy that got it done in the fourth quarter. And he has 15 receptions, 156 yards, most for a tight end. So, they could be selling high in his case for Brock Bowers, but I just felt like I didn't want to keep chasing tight end. At Jake Ferguson, who when I kind of had a little buyer's remorse after the fact when they were talking about how fast Jake Ferguson was coming back, but it's a PPR league, and I think that's what settled it for me. And we're talking about depth. I had J.K. Dobbins and Brian Robinson, which they're not top 10 running backs, and I think Derrick Henry can flirt with that this season. But it's just about, you said, attacking a position of need. And I know, Aaron, you were looking at making some moves, and you were kind of on the outside looking in yesterday. But when you see 2 trades go down in one day, what are you sitting there thinking as a manager?
Oh man,
that dude needs a quarterback, Aaron, and you got 2 good ones.
I know that I got left out because literally I was gonna try to make a trade with Rob, but sometimes work gets in the way. I was trying to sneak McBride off that team onto mine so I could kind of snack him with Kyler Murray. Yeah, so we'll see. It's a long season, and there's some trades already going back and forth. So
this is the most active week 3 that I've seen from our league in a while with trades, so that's a good thing. I will say, just to kind of reiterate JJ's trade real quick, I think we might have actually seen what Derrick Henry is, and he told us last season he was aging and maybe hitting that, okay, I'm finally 30. And we kind of saw it at the beginning of the season. He's going to score touchdowns. He's not going to catch balls. And even with 18 carries, he's not having a good yards per carry. I don't hate the trade. I understand exactly why you did it. I would have tried to get something else out of that just because Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. But I also don't blame you for going, hey, I got Brock Bowers. I'm good.
And one of the things I did too, and it's available on the Yahoo platform, is you can do the research and look at what other trades have been made, and 1-for-1 multiple player, and you're looking at who Derrick Henry was traded for. That's one of the things that made me comfortable with it. Is it's kind of what you talked about, Aaron. Like, I'm giving up a name. Like, are we hanging on to more the name value versus real life production? Versus, if Brock Bowers is a consistent thing, and if he's locked in as a top 5 tight end the rest of the way, that's definitely going to be a difference maker this year, just with the landscape of it. Because we know spike weeks are coming from Travis Kelce. We're going to talk about the Lions here in a second with Sam LaPorta. And, having a guy that keeps you there, with Trey McBride, if man, Kyler Murray looked fantastic. And that's 2 good games for Kyler Murray, by the way. They lost the second half against Buffalo, but this is the offense that we expected from the Cardinals. It's a position that we all thought had more depth, and the injuries, the underperformances make it interesting. And I'm just really excited to see how that plays out the rest of the way. And, speaking of one of those tight ends, Steve, the 2-target theory, talk about it all the time. Like, in terms of high-level performance, a passing offense, you're going to have 2 top targets in that offense. Yes, it's fantasy football. We're going to find guys that have spike weeks. We're going to have our flex plays or wide receiver 3s. But what's going on in Detroit, no one saw coming. But it is the top 2 target theory in action. We've talked about Jameson Williams, and he has been a thing. Jameson Williams goes 5 for 121, 1 touchdown and 9 targets week 1. Week 2, 11 targets, so goes 5 for 79. And who has taken a hit because of that? It's Sam LaPorta. 4 for 45, 5 targets week 1, 2 for 13 on 3 targets week 2 that game against the Buccaneers. And your theory, it's right. We thought it was going to be Sam LaPorta, but Williams, man, he has come out of nowhere, and they're taking shots downfield to him.
Well, so Amon-Ra was talking about this offseason. He was saying Jameson was going to have a big season, and it was kind of why I was on him in the beginning, and then I got off of him because I do believe in the 2-target theory, and I really did think Sam LaPorta was going to be that guy. But obviously they've moved their game plan a little bit away from dinking and dunking to LaPorta into, okay, we'll dink and dunk to Amon-Ra, and we're going to take those shots down the field because we have Montgomery and Gibbs in the backfield. When we do a play action, we're going to have time, and let's get that fast guy down the field. Jameson Williams was a first-round draft pick, though, so the talent shouldn't surprise us. He was suspended year 1. Year 2, he was dealing with injuries and all that stuff. So year 3, he's just finally producing with what we thought he was going to produce at, right? He's just finally doing it. And I mean, if this is what their offense looks like, LaPorta might be one of those guys that you try to sell low because you just don't want to.
Are you buying low on LaPorta? We can weave this back into our conversation about players. Like, who are those guys, right? Is you hear those theories, you hear those things in fantasy sports all the time. LaPorta is an interesting one because the same thing. The same is like he has the talent, he just hasn't been factored into the offense. Because when you look at Jameson Williams with what he did in week 2, his target share fell from week 1, but he still had 20%.
Yeah.
So
and honestly, his target share fell, but Amon-Ra's went up. So it's like LaPorta's went down more, right? So it's kind of like, hey, we're still just those 2 are getting the targets, and LaPorta's just going. I'm not interested in buying LaPorta. If I can sell LaPorta for Brock Bowers, I'll do that in a heartbeat. And that might be one of those ones where you make a package and try to be like, I'm giving you LaPorta because it's still Sam LaPorta, and you give me Brock Bowers, and then, oh, I need another receiver. Can you give me one of these extra guys that you're not using, and try to sweeten the deal that way. I still truly believe in the 2-target system, and Detroit, if this is the offense that they're going to run, which I don't see a reason not to, because it's explosive and it's working. I don't know if LaPorta gets back into the mix and we overdrafted him.
Okay, so this is one where I'm interested to see how explosive they want to be, because Jared Goff turned it over. And I think asking Jared Goff to be that explosive every week is not a recipe for success.
That's fair.
That's valid. Yeah, I like that.
And so these are we dive into the notes, try to figure it out. And so that's why LaPorta is interesting. I would make those first inroads if I needed a tight end, or if I was someone that I'm trying to even think, you like who you'd have at tight end, maybe even go get a Sam LaPorta. But would you give up a Kincaid
for LaPorta
or an Andrews potentially in that discussion?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
But if I'm interested in LaPorta, I wait until after this week because I think he has another bad week.
I think so too. No, I was gonna say as a Laporta owner in my other money league, I'm at full panic because I didn't think that many targets would go Jameson's way. So I
So
don't think I'm gonna be able to ship him out in this league to even. I would have to package him with someone else to get that trade, and it's just gonna probably be a sit and wait. And hopefully, things change.
And some players you
the
have to do that with. Like,
the
Mhm.
argument you can make real quick though is like Arizona has Buda Baker, who usually shadows tight ends, so he's probably gonna. That's why I think he's gonna have a bad week. But that doesn't mean the week after, that he might not come back to who he should be, right? Like Arizona doesn't have the greatest pass defense, but they are good at guarding the tight end. I think we could see a big week after this. So if you're going to buy LaPorta, I think you do it after this Arizona game, because I think managers like Aaron will be panicking.
Or if you want to sell him high.
Sell him before this week. Yeah, if you're trying to
So
sell him.
it will be something to watch too. The play of Jared Goff, like if he's turning the football over, maybe they wheel it back in a little bit, and then that is how Sam LaPorta gets involved. But Williamson's explosive, and we're seeing so much talk about two high safeties in the NFL and teams trying to take those deep shots away. So if Detroit has something that's working, you do got to keep feeding that. But I do think the turnover rate of Jared Goff can dictate how aggressive they're going to be, and that's been an interesting thing to see. Mel Kiper of all people on ESPN today say ban two high safeties. It's like, what? Like it's like Major League Baseball banning the shift. It's like, figure it out. Do something else. Run the football. Like when the NBA's outlawed zone defense for a while. I had no idea that was a thing. Like, just figure it out.
You just have to run the ball against that look. Like, just run, and then you'll be fine. I don't understand why.
I think we're seeing offensive line play, young quarterbacks getting shredded when we talk about the quarterback hype with what's going on, and just defenses wanting to keep everything in front. And we saw some of that, rear its head when it comes to the fantasy football expectations. But, speaking of those young quarterbacks, reshuffling the quarterbacks 2 weeks in, what if I told you that QB1 was Baker Mayfield and QB2 was Derek Carr? What world would you think we would be living in?
2018.
I like Baker a little bit, but I didn't see this. And then of course nobody saw Derek Carr. The Saints were miserable most of last season. They should have had an offense that scored. They would move the ball but couldn't score and turned it over and bunch of mess. But now they're hot.
last week's performance kind of boosts his numbers a little bit too. Like when you score 42 points, it's like that week the Dolphins scored 70 last year. Like those numbers look awesome, but that's like Achane had one game of 50 points. Well, he only scored 150 all year. So
yeah, but we also know that there's going to be bigger game scripts for Derek Carr. Like,
for sure,
not going to get to only complete 11 passes for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. So that's going to bode well for fantasy owners if he's throwing the football more. But it's one, I think early in the season, bye. People got Baker Mayfield into more lineups last week. Derek Carr needs to be in lineups if you're looking for a quarterback this week. I'm talking, the Dak Prescott owners. I picked up Derek Carr. Like I'm looking at, that's an explosive offense. And we talked about how the Lions are pushing the football downfield. Rashid Shaheed is a thing, and they're doing that. So now you have Shaheed, Olave, and Alvin Kamara. Looks like he's gotten a DeLorean, and he only had to go back 3 years, but he's fantastic. And our guys, I think early in the season are playable right now. Are these guys that are going to carry you the entire season? No, because when you look at the underperforming quarterbacks, that's where the trust is. But just right now, how do you guys feel in 10 to 12 team leagues about these guys being lineup locks at the quarterback position going into this week? Because we got the Buccaneers hosting the Denver Broncos and a juicy matchup with the Saints and Eagles.
I mean, I'm playing them until they stop, until the points flow stops. So they'll be in my lineup until until there's consistent duds. 'Cause right now
Honest,
it's like things are trending favorably, so might as well ride it out.
I could honestly see an argument to be made that Derek Carr should start over Patrick Mahomes this week.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Let's hear it.
if you look at the last few weeks, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now this could change because Isaiah Pacheco's on IR and Andy Reid made it very vague statement that he could come back this season or next season. So who knows when Isaiah Pacheco comes back? But uh, overall, Patrick Mahomes, they haven't been airing out the ball. They've been just slowly matriculating down the field with the running game, and he doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns. They get in close and they hand it off, or they do awesome reverses to Xavier Worthy. Like he's not the Patrick Mahomes that threw 55 touchdowns. Their offense is good, but he's not the one who's making those big plays. Now, I don't think that continues, but Derek Carr is playing an Eagles defense that the last 2 weeks have made their quarterbacks they're playing look amazing, right? Jordan Love had a ton of big plays against them. And last week, Kirk Cousins, who week 1 we wrote off, looked like
We got 80 yards in that final drive because the Philadelphia defense played not
Just-
to win that game.
Just prevent.
right. But there's you know what I mean? Like we had said Kirk Cousins looked bad. And then
He
one
did.
drive, 80 yards and a touchdown, he looked good.
Eagles threw
So
him a lifeline, man.
right.
That changed the Falcons season because they
It
lose
did.
that game. All the talk this week is why isn't Michael Penix quarterback for the Falcons?
Right.
100%
so
agree.
You're talking about Derek Carr, I think, could do the same thing. They're leaving gaping holes. The defense is what Miami ran last year, and it felt. I watched that game with the Eagles versus the Falcons, and it felt just like that Tennessee Titan game where the Dolphins are up 2 touchdowns with 4 minutes left, and then the Tennessee Titans score 15 points in those last 4 minutes. Because a lot of the time Vic Fangio's defense looks awesome, but then because it's a lot of, well, if this happens, do this and back up that guy, especially early in the season, people make mistakes. And that's what we're seeing, right? That's where we're seeing those gaping holes in the middle of the field, or those out routes just being wide open because the corner bit down. You're still going to see those. And I think we might continue to see those. And Derek Carr, I could see having a massive game.
I know, and Aaron, you jumped on the Rashid Shaheed bandwagon. You picked him up off waivers after week 1. This is a guy we were kind of talking up a little bit before the season started as potential watch list, but he is doing exactly what Jameson Williams is doing for the Lions.
Yeah, it's crazy because I wasn't really sure, on those 2 receivers. That's a perfect comparison of, them two. It's like I kind of like it, but I also don't, and they're Shaheed's hitting right now, so like, all right, I'll pick him up while it's early. So I think he'll be there for a while. So
Yeah, Clint Kubiak, new offense coordinator. Saints, they're using motion, they're using play action, they're pushing the football downfield. And when it comes to the quarterbacks, and you mentioned, Steve, that you might not even play Patrick Mahomes right now. Let's look at this tier of quarterbacks now. If you kind of go outside the top 10, and we're looking at 4-point passing touchdown league right now. That's what I'm basing this off of. But you have a tier where it's Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, CJ Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson somehow, Brock Purdy, and then Joe Burrow right above Dak Prescott. And that's why, yes, Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr have scored a lot of points, but I'd still be believing in those guys in lineups because Dak Prescott essentially potentially just 1 target against the Ravens. Yeah, he threw for a bunch of yards, but he still had 2 interceptions last week. Didn't come up with a big game. Brock Purdy should have a blow-up spot against the Rams, but do they end up maybe just controlling that game more with Jordan Mason? Ayuk gets a couple, Kittle gets a couple. He doesn't have to have a big game. I'm all in on Joe Burrow, though. He's the one name I would start against the Washington Commanders secondary. Absolutely. But what it's also showing is when you look at this list, it's after Mayfield and Carr, it's Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and still Anthony Richardson, even after the bad game against the Packers at his standards. What is it showing you guys? 4-point passing touchdown leagues still matter. And that's been a big thing early in the season.
Yeah, but it always does. So
And
until we get to
reiterates our point that we drafted quarterbacks too early.
Till we get to the 6-point passing touchdowns, it might even out a little bit more. But yeah, it's another point of wait to draft a quarterback because
if you waited, those guys aren't doing well. The do not draft a quarterback club is what's doing well. It's Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. Because if you waited, if you're on the Brock Purdy, even Joe Burrow, he was going 8th, 9th round, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, or to a train, you're in the station right now trying to put some coal in that engine. And the quarterbacks that went a little bit higher, like Kyler, you got started getting a lot of buzz start the season. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, doing all right. But I think it's really interesting now the fact that heading into this week that we are legitimately talking about Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr being startable, not in 10 or 12 team leagues. But it's like you said, Aaron, you'll ride that wave until it is. Now, of those guys, though, I want to get your thoughts. When you're looking at Mahomes, and I thought, Steve, you had a good discussion about him and kind of seeing do they try to open it up more, maybe a little bit with Isaiah Pacheco being out, but Purdy, Burrow, Prescott, even Trevor Lawrence down there. How are you feeling about those guys?
Purdy scares me a little bit because Debo's out. And CMC is a great pass catching back, and Mason's not that. So he's not going to get those cheap dump downs that he gets to CMC. So until CMC comes back, and Debo, I'm probably not as interested in Purdy. Trevor Lawrence, same thing. But most of the time, if you ended up with one of those guys, hopefully you kind of saw the writing on the wall and you picked up Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield. Obviously, the Tua manager and the Jordan Love manager have had to pick up players as well. So, maybe you picked up Geno Smith or you look at some of those other quarterbacks that can just get you good weeks here and there.
Yeah, and you can always go into that too, because the two positions that you can really stream, in my opinion, is quarterback and tight end. So you get stuck into that where it's just like, well, we're going to play the matchup of the week, and it happens to be someone that's on waivers, and keep that carousel going because it's a strategy that can be used.
Or you go to the owner who has Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson and go, hey, do you want to trade one of those guys? Because you can't start them both.
There's that too. Have those conversations about potential trades. And you look at the weekend, some of the names that you mentioned, and the Seahawks at home against the Dolphins. And Seattle is a 4-point favorite in that. And it's an opportunity again for Geno Smith because Kenneth Walker dealing with that oblique. The Patriots are able to take away Charbonnet. I think maybe he's more of a game plan. But all of a sudden, Geno Smith becomes interesting because Jackson Smith and Jigba, welcome to the NFL. It's nice to see you. The first-round pick last year out of Ohio State, 12 catches, 117 yards. And, yeah, that gets me interested in Geno Smith as a streaming option. What do you think of the Seahawks versus that Dolphins defense? To our Dolphins insider.
Honestly, it's going to be a game that Seattle should win handily if I'm thinking about it, just because I don't know if the offense for Miami is going to be on the field long enough. And I could see the Dolphins defense being tired by the second half, and then you could see a blow up game. So I know it's only a 4-point. They're only giving Seattle 4 points, which I think is too low. I honestly see the Seahawks winning by 7-10. I don't think Skyler can keep that team afloat while Tua is out. So they picked up Tyler Huntley, and I think we'll see him against Tennessee on Monday night next week.
And when you look at the Dolphins, then we were able to talk about it last week after the injury. We're still on, I think it's all in on the running back. I think Achane
Mhm.
can still be RB1 status with they're feeding him. Do you think that Reek is the first target they'll feed him? What does that do for Waddle then?
Skylar Thompson, when he played 2 years ago when Tua went down with the concussion, Tyreek still had his targets. He had less explosive plays, but he still ended up with a ton of targets and yards and touchdowns. Waddle was the one who suffered the most during that stretch. He still had good weeks, but they weren't as consistent. Honestly, I saw a few people that I respect talking about starting Allen Lazard over Jalen Waddle this week. And, Allen Lazard already has a touchdown and a few catches. So it doesn't look like the wrong move. I totally get it because, if I was in a better spot, I'm not starting Waddle in any leagues where I don't have to.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a little less. What would be the good word? Um, Tyreek's gonna get his, but Waddle's gonna. I definitely agree. Waddle's gonna suffer, and
Is
we'll
Waddle a
see
hold
because.
in this case?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think. I mean, Tua went on IR, and they're saying he'll be out.
Ours a
He
minimum of
was
4 weeks.
right. He said he was going to be ready to come back in 2 to 3. So they're putting him on IR so that he has to sit out. But I think he's not going to be ready to come back till week 7 or 8 at the earliest, right? So I think you hold Waddle unless you can get something good for him. But I don't think you're going to be able to get something good for him after this week because you're going to see a bad performance. You might be able to get something out of him now because he's had 2 good games in a row. But unless you can get rid of him, and you do need to get something good back, right? Don't sell him for pennies on the dollar, but you might need to sell him for what you can get, especially
if
if you're nervous about your team.
yeah, I think he's gonna have to just be a hold on your team. So I think it'll be a little bit of sell. Um, everyone's they know what the Dolphins' passing game is going to be like without Tua, and it's too many steps down, in my opinion. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Waddle was my man crush all season, but obviously you have to have Tua there. You need your quarterback. A good quarterback can sustain 2 targets. I do not think a mid-level quarterback can sustain 2 targets. So I
Yeah,
don't see Waddle being productive.
yeah, it's reeking. Achane, when you look at what he did, 29 touches in that week 2 game. He is going to be a focal point of
They're
that.
going to break him if they continue at that level.
I'm glad you said that because a lot of people are just like, yeah, Achan, and like, did you see how much he's getting used? I was like, I don't know if the longevity will hold up the whole season with that usage, and it's even scarier now that the passing game's hurt. So
Yeah. I think we'll see more Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good play for Mike McDaniel. Scheme up some runs for Skylar Thompson, make it easier, knowing that he has the weapons. So get those other running backs involved, give them a chance at Seattle. So waivers are in. You guys have looked at the rankings. You've read all the fantasy stuff. We're just here talking football, having some fun, but trying to sort through it as we approach the weekend. So let's do a quick rundown. Just things to watch out for. Denver at Tampa Bay. I'm interested in that backfield with Rashid White getting banged up a little bit. And he's a dude that was all about volume. Like he never has really popped when it comes to the rushing metrics, yards per carry. But it's about volume. So that's maybe something I keep an eye on how he plays versus Bucky Irving in that game. But how about Chris Godwin? What a game for him last week. Mike Evans, quiet Godwin explodes. And I think this is why you can trust Baker Mayfield, is because he's going to get those guys involved. One or the other is going to have a huge game. And there's enough. I don't know if there's enough there in the running game to lean on when Baker Mayfield is out rushing White right now. But hey, it shows you Baker Mayfield's willing to put his head down, get you a couple yards, maybe add 20, 25 rush.
he's got the juke moves, bro.
Packers Titans, of course, this weekend it comes down to who's starting at quarterback. If you can start a Packers wide receiver or not. If it's Malik Willis, we know the game plan. Josh Jacobs, 32 carries. An unbelievable game. The Colts couldn't. They knew it was coming. They still couldn't stop him. And Malik Willis was efficient. 12 of 14, threw a touchdown pass. So that game comes down to just who's starting, if you can play your Packers or not. But what could be a revenge game. Going back to Tennessee, Jordan Love limited, so he could be coming back. Let's keep an eye on that. But what do you guys make of the Titans? Calvin Ridley had some explosive plays, but Will Levis always has one redonkulous play a week. And Tony Pollard is emerging as the RB1 there too.
Yeah, definitely like Tony Pollard. I was like, I hated the backfield, but it's kind of, separated itself now. And Tony Pollard there, I like him. Calvin Ridley, they're throwing Calvin Ridley every which way. So Calvin Ridley, get him in there. Will Levis brings his value down a little bit because Will Levis is like a meme generator every week. So, but
yeah, I think the one thing I will say is I think you hold Tajay Spears. We know Tony Pollard is the guy, but Tajay Spears is one injury away from being the guy as well. So just because he's not maybe performing at the highest level, I don't think you want to get rid of him because the Titans still seem to want to run, and Tajay Spears is still getting a lot of third down work. So just, if you are the Tajay Spears owner, don't panic yet.
It's okay to hold some guys on your bed. There's, reason that I picked up Breon Allen this week, knowing I'm not going to start him, but he's a handcuff. He's getting some plays, and it's good to have some of those guys on your roster.
And he looks great. And if Breece Hall goes down, you have a RB1.
Yep.
Colts, Bears, Indianapolis, 1.5-point favorites near Chicago. So this is a different episode. We don't have time to go down this rant that I could go on for young quarterbacks, but it shows you how hard it is to be a quarterback in the NFL. We thought that Caleb Williams was walking in one of the best situations a rookie quarterback has ever gone into. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift. And it hasn't looked that way at all. 93 yards, week 1, 2 interceptions against the Texans. DeAndre Swift's not running the football. They're not able to push football downfield. Keenan Allen hasn't been playing. It's hard. And it does make you second guess. You know what? If you take a quarterback and you have another top 10 pick, get him an offensive tackle. Build the lines up. But this is the question I have for you guys in this game. More passing yards. Anthony Richardson or Caleb Williams? Who you got?
Richardson.
Oh, wow. That was easy.
Well, I don't think Caleb Williams can drop back more than 3 feet without being hit. I mean, he had 42 dropbacks and 36 pressures.
It was a lot.
That is insane to me. That is like when David Carr came out. This poor kid is just getting screamed at every play. So, if he's having to run around all the time, it's kind of hard to throw down the field. So hopefully he can get that together. But, Richardson might only complete 40% of his passes, but one will be a 60-yard bomb.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
How about some design runs for Anthony Richardson? Still use his legs, Indianapolis. That's a thing that benefits him. Don't take it away from him. Design him some runs and help your offense. And maybe even put Jonathan Taylor on the football field in the fourth quarter. Okay. Why do you scheme him out of the offense?
That was weird. That was
49% snap share. Yeah. So he dropped a pass, fumbled a reception out of bounds on 4 targets. So it wasn't crisp in the passing game. But then to just see him not play in the fourth quarter.
Not play in the fourth quarter, yeah.
It was wild.
I was wondering if he got injured, but then nothing came out on it. So I was like, huh.
They essentially benched him. They didn't trust him.
Doghouse.
Yeah, that's tough one there. One of the most surprising teams of the season, man, the Minnesota Vikings, 2-0, big win over San Francisco. It looks like Jetta is going to be good to go. You saw the play he got hurt on. You can tell he probably just has a nasty bruise he's dealing with on that quad. But you get C.J. Stroud, that passing attack. Joe Mixon did not practice, so it could be Cam Akers season against what is been a good Vikings defense. Is Brock Purdy crediting Brian Flores there, but Sam Darnold is doing what you hoped if you drafted Justin Jefferson. It's keeping him alive. The offense is moving. Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler is a name to have on your watch list. If you talk about rostering a running back, Ty Chandler could be a guy to pick up if you just want to play the wait and see game, because he's getting some looks. He's looked explosive, and Aaron Jones did fumble at the goal line, and he's an older running back. But Steve, I want to get your thoughts, because I know Tank Dell's a guy that you like. Tank Dell is getting the snaps. They're rotating Dell and Diggs a lot on the field. And this is one where Nico Collins outright number one target, and it's going to be a coin flip to who's the second target. But it feels like Tank, with his route participation, knowing how good CJ Stroud is, because Tank Dell ran a route on 85% of his drop back last week. That's a guy you got to keep putting in at wide receiver, keep putting in as your flex, and just waiting for that big game when it hits.
Tank Dell is my buy low candidate or buy low player. Like, he's had 2 bad games in a row. I still believe like you said, he's participating in a ton of the routes. He's getting the looks, and him and CJ Stroud have a connection. If I can get Tank Dell right now for cheap, I want to get him. And I bet you can, because most players draft him as their wide receiver 3. I bet you can kind of snag him for something relatively low. I think Tank Dell has a good week this week. I don't know how big of a week, but I see him finally getting those yards that he's getting the targets and the looks. He's just not getting the
He sees that 140-yard touchdown.
Yep. And I think we're going to finally see it. If I'm looking at the Texans offense, Stephon Diggs really does seem to be the red zone guy. And Nico Collins and Tank Dell seem to be the guys CJ Stroud wants to lean on to get the ball down the field, right? Those are the guys I want to use to get the ball down the field. Obviously, Nico Collins is the number 1, and we draft him that way. But Tank Dell seems to be the wide receiver 2, even though we're not seeing it yet. And that's why I think he's a good buy low candidate.
And it could benefit them with Joe Mixon being out.
Yeah.
The pass catchers in this game.
You're right. You are right.
So let's run down just a couple more games. Just fantasy thoughts that are flowing in my mind right now. Panthers at the Raiders. So Andy Dalton, the starting quarterback for the Panthers. Does this give life to Deontay Johnson owners?
I'd say probably, but not too much. I don't have a lot of confidence still with the Panthers, but
because when you look at making a decision, and you're probably sitting there like, what is my flex going to look like this week? And they're 2 former Steelers. Well, one's a Steeler receiver, and one's a former Steelers receiver. But like Pickens and Deontay Johnson, like you know the talent's there. You're waiting for them to have bigger games, and is Deontay Johnson could be playable in this matchup against the Raiders. Vegas is a 5-point favorite, but over-under is only 39.5 points. So that's not great.
Not very hard, no.
I think Pickens has like the most yards called back due to penalties this season, though. That dude, every time I see him make a big play, it's like, holding on the line. I'm like, dang, man, this dude's going to have a game. I am a Deontay Johnson owner, and I don't want to start him yet. I want to see what I want to see it. It's so hard to just be like,
I gotta see it with my own eyes first.
Right. Like, is Andy Dalton going to feed him? Who's he going to feed? Right.
That is a tough question. Who's going to be the quarterback's favorite coming out right away?
Because I don't know who that is. Gardner Minshew, we would have said it was going to be Devontae Adams, and it's Brock Bowers. So
Adams, but two target system. It's your Kobe Myers is the one that's on the outside looking in.
He is on the outside looking in. I didn't think Bowers.
Yeah, but I didn't think Bowers was going to be this guy. And so who's Andy Dalton going to throw? He's going to throw to somebody. I just don't know who it is. And I don't want to start Deontay because the Panthers are terrible.
Yep.
But who knows? This could be that spark that, right? Everybody's like, oh, they needed that spark. And
just if he can become flex worthy for people that are holding on to Deontay Johnson, that's what you're looking out there.
Honestly, I was going to drop him this week until they said, oh, Andy Dalton's starting quarterback. I was like, I'll give it one more week.
Yeah, Max Crosby. They got to deal with that guy. So I was like,
they can't run the football. You got Christian Wilkinson in the middle. Got Max Crosby coming. This could be a blow up spot for the Raiders. Speaking of players that you might be sitting on waiting, Zamir White, now or never game.
It is an now or never. literally at this point.
If he doesn't produce against the Panthers, bench.
Yep.
All right. Like I would, if I was a Zamir White owner, I'd start him this game. I would. And if he doesn't perform, peace out.
Yep.
Alexander Mattison, let's see what you got, because you didn't do it last year in Minnesota. But to your point, Steve, you brought up about the DPI flags that were drawn last week. Shout out the Sheesh report on Fantasy Life, one of the things I love to look at each week. The top 7 players that gained the most flags due to defensive pass interference. George Pickens was 3rd with 37 yards that he missed out on due to defensive pass interference. By the way, Devontae Adams at 40 and Trey Palmer had 41 yards. Those are your top 3 players getting some DPIs last week. And that leads us to plant your flag. What are we going to do? We're going to state a player that we like. It's going to have a big week on our team, not on our team. Maybe you can use them in daily fantasy. You can get an Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code JJBuck, by the way, when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy to get your sign-up bonus that you like the higher on his stat projection. Plant your flag. We're going to start doing this every week at the end. See what we got. Aaron, who are you planting your flag with this weekend?
So it's not just one player for me, and it's easy. I'm going to go with 2 players on the Cardinals. You guys could probably guess who they are. Quarterback, wide receiver. You already know who they are. I'm not going to say their name. 1 receiver, Indianapolis Colts. I'm going with. It's going to be Alec Pierce. He's going to continue. He's going to be the number 1 target still. He's going to score. They're at home, I believe. I checked that right. Against Green Bay. They're in Indianapolis. So if they're in Indy, double check me on that. But they play good there. So I'm going with him.
Hosting the Bears.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah. Plant your flag, Steve. Who you got?
So I have 2 players. I think Raheed Shaheed is going to have a huge week. I'm seeing another 120 and 2 touchdown game. Like, I really think he's going to have a blow up game. I legitimately could see 25 points from him this week easily. That defense is not looking good over in Philadelphia, so he's my number 1. My second one is just a boom or bust flex, but Gabe Davis. It's a revenge game, right? It's Jacksonville versus Buffalo, and Gabe Davis is over there in Jacksonville now. I'm going to flex him. I'm going to do a boomer bust flex with Gabe Davis this week and see how it goes. Yeah. Revenge games are a thing. So.
I like it. Alec Pierce, Gabe Davis. Good. This is what I'm looking for in this segment. Not the obvious. Going for big games. So I'm going, my plant the flag is going to be Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has been disappointing. Deshaun Watson, we didn't want anything to do with the Browns. Still don't really want a lot to do with the Browns. But I'm talking blow-up spot this week against the New York Giants. Amari Cooper is still getting looks. He has 17 targets on the season and 5 receptions. This, to me, feels like the classic Cooper has 5 for 120 and a touchdown type of game. Amari Cooper, Giants secondary, Deshaun Watson, I think he'll take a few more shots this week than he did last week. I'm planting my flag with Amari Cooper.
I like that one. The targets have been there for Amari. It just hasn't turned into anything yet. And it will at some point. It's always been the case. So I like it.
So as we look at the rest of the fantasy weekend, is there anything that's on your guys' minds? Anything that you're watching out for, you're waiting on ahead of Sunday that you want to see, etc., before we wrap up this fantasy spin?
Nothing in particular. I do want to just make a lineup suggestion to everyone because it's rookie mistakes we see all the time. Remember to start your Thursday players in your normal lineup, not your flex, and your Monday players in your flex, just in case something like Evan Ingram happens. You can pull them out and drop somebody on your bench and put them into your to to your lineup. So just kind of remember that then you're not stuck having to pick up a wide receiver. If one of your receivers goes down, you can pick up a running back or whoever it may be. So just a quick lineup suggestion.
PSA, I like it.
Yep, it's great advice. I don't have anything other than that. I was literally going to say that. Make sure to check your lineup that Evan Ingram didn't get hurt before the game.
Hopefully Gabe Davis does go off against the Bills for the Jaguars.
Because I need it.
Bounce back. Because, man, Jacksonville is where hope goes to die these days.
Yes.
For football. But it's going to be awesome, man. We got another full Sunday, 2 Monday Night Football games. So that's a good PSA from Steve. Remember, Jaguars at Bills, Commanders at Bengals are both Monday Night Football games this week. You can follow us on the Instagram at 3DudesFantasyFootball. There's an underscore there, of course, on the X at 3DudesFFS. And like and subscribe. We continue to just have fun, talk football. And we know that the rankings, the articles, you guys read them all. We're going to take notes and nuggets. We'll be like Wikipedia, credit all our favorite fantasy sources, and just talk some football with you and have some fun, because it's nothing better than talking fantasy football and overreacting each and every single week, getting ready for the weekend. But gentlemen, as always, it's been fun, and may the fantasy odds be in your favor week 3 of the NFL season.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good luck, everyone.
Good luck, y'all. Yep.